Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're here today to discuss a pivotal shift in how the public sector innovates, operates, and serves our nation. It's clear we've moved beyond the initial hype of artificial intelligence and into a new phase, the art of the practical. It's no longer about what AI could do. It's about what is it already doing right now to transform the government's ability to serve mission. Gartner recently named Google the company to beat in the enterprise agentic AI platforms race. And Google Cloud was also recognized as the #1 cloud provider in this year's Cloud Wars Top 10 list by Bob Evans. And it's this industry recognition that really is a testament to our commitment to scalable enterprise adoption, our leadership, which is fueled by Google DeepMind in both vision and innovation for AI in government. And we truly believe the public sector should have access to the same powerful, secure by design, commercial cloud technology as the private sector. And so today, we're going to be discussing Gemini for Government. This is our flagship agentic AI offering. Gemini for Government serves as the unified front door for the best of Google's AI optimized, secure, and accredited commercial cloud services and our industry-leading Gemini models and agentic solutions. And my colleague and Google Public Sector CTO, Chris Hine, will be joining me in a minute to dive deeper into use cases, live demos, as well as success stories from public sector peers who are already achieving incredible results. And we'll back this up with some fresh data on the ROI agencies are already seeing from their AI investments and give you a glimpse into the trends shaping the year ahead. And we'll conclude with some live Q&A. So let's dive in. This is a new era of innovation. Public sector agencies, including academia, research organizations, are already harnessing the power of Gemini and Google's AI agents to build a more efficient, responsive, and effective government. We are incredibly excited to support the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, who selected Google Cloud's Gemini for Government to serve as the first enterprise AI technology deployed on the US Department of War's GenAI.mil to serve over 3 million civilian and military personnel. The US Department of Transportation selected Google Workspace with Gemini as their new AI-enabled collaboration suite to help employees securely connect, create, and collaborate. And earlier this month, we announced a strategic partnership with Purdue University to advance AI-enabled education by providing students, faculty, and researchers access to Google's AI platform, our purpose-built tensor processing units, and Google's DeepMind co-scientist multi-agent system. So these are just a few examples of our public sector customers applying AI to mission. And so the question has now shifted from, should we consider AI, to how do we deploy AI at scale? So our goal today is to show you the path to real-world, scalable action that delivers measurable outcomes. We know the public sector is unique. Your missions from national security to public health, they have higher stakes. They have stricter requirements for trust and security than any other sector. You need more than promises, you need proof. We recently conducted a comprehensive study on the ROI of AI in public sector. The results are very compelling. They show that leading agencies are already moving from pilots to production. 55% of public sector leaders report their organization has adopted AI agents in production. 42% of public sector leaders report their organization has deployed more than 10 AI agents. So the three areas of impact are workforce productivity, improved citizen services, and better decision-making. 70% of public sector leaders report improved productivity from generative AI, and 46% say employee productivity has at least doubled. So a more productive workforce powered by AI agents means faster response times, reduced services backlogs, and more personalized delivery of public sector services. We're also seeing significant gains in service delivery. 59% of public sector leaders report they are using AI agents for constituent service and experience. And by analyzing vast data sets quickly, AI is helping leaders make more informed, data-driven decisions faster than ever before. So we know the value of AI for public sector is real, but how do we achieve it at scale? And successful AI requires more than just a model. It requires a complete set of tools and an integrated AI-optimized technology stack. And it is precisely this integrated technology stack that makes Gemini for Government so powerful. So to unpack all of this a bit further, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and public sector CTO, Chris Hine, to share more about our technical vision and our capabilities. Chris, over to you.
Thank you so much, Brent, and thank all of you for showing up today. You know, as Brent was unpacking some of the statistics that we got out of that ROI report, one of the ones that's not contained in there, but I think is really interesting, is that we had a similar webinar that we put on a couple of months back, and we got 3 times more registrations for this one than we did the one back then. And I'm very confident it's not because Brent and I were the keynoters on it, but it's in fact that everyone in the public sector knows that this is the moment, right? Like these agents and these agentic workflows, this is what's coming next. And so it is what is here, what's coming next. So let's get into it. What is this thing, and how are we going to be using it across public sector entities? So, you know, first off, what I'd like to sometimes do in these conversations is actually take a step back before we take a step forward. Because why is Google in this arena, right? Like, why is this something that we care deeply about? And what I tend to think of is when we started Google 26 years ago, it was really this front door to the internet. And it was this ridiculously simple concept of saying that we were going to take all of the complexity that was going on behind the scenes in the public internet, and we were going to hide all of that complexity through this really, really simple search interface, right? Just a white screen with a search bar, and then you get what you need from that. And that changed everything about how the internet worked. Everything could flourish as a result of that because there was so much more ease in getting the things that you need to do to see on the internet by having this really simple but incredibly powerful front door. And what we're putting forward today when we talk about Gemini for Government is that same concept. It's that same front door where there's a ton of complexity below the surface. There's going to be multiple AI agents that are going to be working both on Google's platforms, but also on your other SaaS platforms. And all of those agents can create a new form of complexity if we let that get up to our end users. And so what we're really proud of and what we really took inspiration from that kind of front door perspective when it came to building Google Search is we wanted to take that same perspective when we were building out Gemini for Government so that your users, your public sector workforce could have that same really, really simple place to just go get their work done, but to be able to get it done with agentic AI powering the entire back end of it. And so what we need to really think about, and Brent hit on this a little bit, but I'm gonna spend a few minutes really kind of taking you through it, is that this builds off of over a decade of Google's investment in our AI infrastructure to make it so that we can do this kind of project for the public sector. You know, he mentioned our work with the CDAO and having over 3 million service members that now have access to Gemini for Government through the GenAI.mil platform. That's only possible. That's only possible because of the fact that we've invested so much in our AI infrastructure over the past 10 years, and we've made that AI infrastructure compliant with government needs. And that's where we start at that secure foundation. That is that level of us ensuring that anything that you're going to work with when you're using our Gemini family of models in these Gemini for Government instances is private and secure and compliant. Because if we can't do those things for you, nothing else matters. If we can't protect your data, there's no reason you should trust us to be using us as your agentic partner. And so that's the foundation. We have to start with that and ensure that we're doing those pieces correctly for you. And then it's that AI-ready infrastructure. And so Google has been building out our own tensor processing units, or TPUs, which allow us to be able to scale to 3 million users in a few weeks' time. That's the level of what we need to be able to do to get those kinds of levels of every user having the best experience we can possibly get them on our frontier models. And then you get into the data. And this is, again, a place where Google gets to kind of benefit from all the different data sources that one can draw upon when you think about the different Google sources of information. And so this can be anything from making sure that we're grounding on Google Maps data. Because if you're going to be doing queries and you're going to be doing prompts that have some sort of geolocation element to it, you need to be able to ground in real world information so that the models themselves aren't going to hallucinate because they have access to the appropriate data sources and can go ground against those data sources as they work. And I'll show you this in the demo that it can also be grounded off of Google search data. And so it's not just based off of the data sets that were built into the model when it was done in its training, but it can have a live view of what exists on the internet today, as well as the data that you've integrated into it in your platform, in your Gemini for Government instance. And then I'll talk in the next slide here about what the AI models are that are powering this, but really making sure that you're getting frontier level models and the best of that kind of AI that one can put in front of your users. And then finally, the biggest thing that you're going to start to see out of this platform is that it is built with agents as kind of a first tier of what we anticipate you using it for. Right? There's going to be lots of ways that you can just having access to an amazing frontier model is great, but where those ROI figures start to come in is when we build and deploy and manage agents at scale across your entire fleet. And so this is, a really important, set of infrastructure that Google has put together that really differentiates us from the entire market and what is possible in this space. And then just a quick aside on this, another proof point perhaps. Google released its end of year 2025 earnings just yesterday. And in it, just an incredible stat for you. We spent over $90 billion in AI infrastructure in 2025. That's chips, that's data centers, that's energy, and that is powering this stack that you see on the screen. But we're not done, because we just announced that we will be likely doubling that number to $170 to $180 billion of additional AI infrastructure that we anticipate spending in 2026. And so if you're looking for where is the scale going to come from, Google's got this part covered. We are very confident that this is going to be the next industrial revolution, and this general purpose tool will be what our workforce needs to make government and educational institutions significantly better moving into the next couple of years. So I mentioned Gemini 3 and really our frontier levels of models. And what I want you to kind of baseline off of here is that as we've been doing our research and building out net new large language models, what we have been really thinking through and anticipating on that is not just, how do you add more data to it or how do you add more compute to it? That's important, but it's only one part of the story. The other things that you need to be able to do is you need to make sure that you're solving for the problems that actually make these things productive in your workforce. And so the three I want to really kind of hone in on as we think about this and how it's going to integrate into Gemini for Government is here on your screen. The first one is SOTA, which for those of you that are not in the world that uses the acronyms all the time, state-of-the-art reasoning and multimodality. And this actually comes out of that data pillar that I mentioned earlier on. Because what you see in the Gemini 3 launch is its ability to reason and understand multimodal, meaning not just text, but images, videos, audio, the entire kind of ecosystem of senses that one can provide to these AI models. It can reason through those. And the reason that we are particularly good at that is we have this wealth of information that we can train off of and ensure that we're getting the best quality data that helps us to do really high level reasoning. And so when you're using this to help you plan your logistics, right, as a government agency, or if you're trying to understand better what's going on in video footage or imagery that's provided, that understanding of real world spatial data is incredibly important to you. Then there's agentic coding, and this is, a lot of people now use the phrase vibe coding, but this is so much more than vibe coding. This is really thinking about how does one create fleets of agents that work in parallel, and how do they do handoffs of the appropriate context and information that they're currently working on, so that you can solve interesting challenges faster using code. And so this is something that you're going to see more and more of as these models release, is its ability to solve these coding challenges by using fleets of agents inside of them. And then finally, advanced tool use and planning. And here, this is important because one of the demos that I'm going to show you today has this kind of idea of tool use built into it. And this is where, when you're building agents for your workforce, you're going to be thinking about, what does it mean for me to make it so that that agent can perform actions? It can go and do next steps. Those are really important things to be able to do. And so making it so that the model has the appropriate hooks to be able to get that done is the really important part of that advanced tool use and planning. So how does all of that integrate into this Gemini for Government platform? Glad you asked. When we built this out, we wanted to focus on a couple of key things, because we did want to create a simple interface that we can use as the front door for these AI agents. But we wanted it to do a couple of things. So first and foremost, we wanted to give you the frontier. We did not want the public sector to get the impression that they were going to get a second grade model or a second grade application and surface that gets them access to those models. No. We want to put you on that same exact infrastructure that is powering all of Google's commercial clients, as well as Google itself, so that you're getting access to the best possible models and being able to take on the highest reasoning tasks that one can get out of the current state of the art of the frontier level models. And we also want to make it so that you can search on your own data, right? So when we put those frontier AI models in, we want to make it so there's multiple ways that you can integrate the data that you have today. We don't anticipate you completely stopping from all the other application surfaces that your workforce uses today. Of course not. And so how can we integrate those, make those accessible to this frontier AI, to make it so that you can get so much more out of those applications than you could in the past? And then, in some ways, maybe most important, I touched a little bit on this, but making sure that we focused in on security and compliance, making sure that when we were going to work with the government and institutions of higher education that we were going to work with, we had to start with this idea of trust and compliance and security. And so this is where we have been feverishly making sure that all of these commercial offerings can be delivered to you at the highest levels of compliance. And so we were able to, when we launched this, already had FedRAMP High for the vast majority of the feature sets, as well as IL4 for folks that work within the defense world. And so this is something that we're really, really excited about in terms of really making it so that aspect of, you aren't going to have to go through a whole bunch of extra checkboxes. We're not trying to get you to risk accept the entirety of a platform. We wanted to come forward with something that you could get real productive use out of, knowing that if you're only working in public data, that's not going to actually move the needle for your industry. You're not going to see that return on investment that we talked about earlier. So then finally, the agentic future. Because this is where we didn't want to meet you just where things are today. We want to help you move to the future. We want to help you understand, what does it look like to be an AI native workforce? How do we start to embed that into the existing human workforce that we have, right? Brent talked through a lot of the statistics of how we're making individual workers sometimes doubling their productivity. And that's amazing, right? And we really want to focus in on that. But then we want to think about, what does it look like when you start to have an entire fleet of agents? What does it look like when you're able to go to a full multi-agent system that works in tandem with your human workforce, with a human in the loop, that allows you to go and make the appropriate decisions at the appropriate times with this entire process? A couple other points on the agentic future, because I think it's really important, is that you can do this with more than just Google's models, right? And so you're not locked into just the Gemini family of models. They're amazing, but you aren't going to be locked into them. So if you want to be working across, the other ecosystem of models that can be deployed through an agent, those are entirely possible to then live inside this same Gemini for Government front door. So we're not doing any lock-ins on the data. If you have an open source or open weight model that you're going to tune with your own data sets, you can now integrate that through an agent in the Gemini for Government platform. And so there's just all these capabilities that start to unlock when we start to think about what this agentic future can look like for us. And as I mentioned on the security and compliance, I just want to, again, just really make sure that you understand how we're doing this, because we are working hand in hand with the authorizers to make sure that all of the feature sets that are coming into the Gemini Enterprise platform, which is the flagship platform inside of Gemini for Government, all of those features we need to be putting at these highest levels of compliance for you today. That is the promise that we have for you, is that it's going to be our top priority, is to ensure this is never going to be a second-class citizen for you. You're going to have access to something that's game-changing for you today. And so everything from just the models themselves being available for you, all the way down to, you're going to see one of our deep research agents, and in the demo here in just a few minutes, that really kind of unpacks that, right? Like how you can start to use, the best of what Google has to offer in a compliant place. And so to kind of work through what this Gemini Enterprise, as I just mentioned, this is the flagship component of Gemini for Government. This is where you're going to spend the vast majority of your time. And so what it looks like when you start to get inside this environment is that it's really, first and foremost, starting off with the brains, right? It gives you access to those frontier models. But then it also integrates into a workbench where you're going to be able to play together with these agents and orchestrate them, put them on schedules, make them do the things that you need them to do to get your work done. You'll have a task force, meaning you've got agents that are sometimes Google built, sometimes your partners will be building these. We know that we are not in this alone. And so if you're going to be using partners, their agents will also show up in this location, as well as if you build your own agents to deploy inside of this. And then the context, right? We can ground all of these services in your data sets. And so how do we make sure that we're doing that for you? And so you can get into a compliant way to come in and get access to the data that already powers your enterprise today. And so before we jump into demo, the last thing I really want to try to articulate and push forward for you all is that what we think about in terms of how to deploy this in a way that's meaningful. How do we make sure we get the return on investment that we talked about? And it starts with what we call day one value. And this is making sure that when you put your people onto the Gemini for Government platform, what are we doing in tandem, you and us and our partners, to make sure that those people come in and they see incredible value from the moment that they start, right? And so this is, that important aspect of being able to really not just throw someone into the pool and assume that they're going to be able to swim, but in fact, really layer in some of the tasks that that they are going to be able to need to do that can make them more productive. How do we make that training and enablement better and faster so that people can get to what they need and take actions on day one that they have access to the set of tools? That's your first day of value. Now, the second part is just weeks away, right? This is not months or years. This world is moving very, very quickly. And so how do we start to help your organization then look at what that agentic future looks like for them? How do you start to build upon that, where whether it's designing your own agents, which I'll show you what that looks like, whether it's having an IT built or a partner built agent that's being delivered into the agent gallery across the enterprise, how are you going to then give each one of those agents enterprise data connections so that they can make sure that they're doing the right things and they can access the data securely that they need to be able to see? And so that's going to be your next couple of weeks, is really investigating what are some of the mission agents, things that make it so that we can succeed in the mission of our agency. How do we do those in those next couple of weeks? And then ongoing, right? Because this will this will be a long journey together. And so as we go forward from that, a lot of what we're going to be eager to work on with you is then fully integrating your enterprise systems. How do we get data connected in? How do we make sure that we're using the agent-to-agent protocol so that if you've got agents in the other SaaS applications that you work in today, how do we get them talking to each other so that we can still have that simple front door, but can build upon that entire ecosystem of what's available to your people throughout the entirety of it. And so that's going to be something that takes us some time. We'll work through that with you all. But in those first couple of weeks, we're going to see the return on investment that Brent already mentioned, because we're going to make that workforce productivity get doubled. We're going to be deploying multiple agents that add value in those first couple of weeks. Those are the things that we're going to be anchoring on and creating success so that you've got kind of that path forward to continue to leverage this entire agentic experience. So let's get to the demo. So what you can see here is this is the Gemini enterprise experience. And this is where we've got that simple front door that I spoke about quite a few times now. But it gives you just that ability to work inside of, and have access to all of the different tools that are across the ecosystem of Google's AI services. And so you've got the ability to search within your own data. As I mentioned, you can integrate the Google search data itself. And then we've got deep research agents. I'll show you that one in a minute. You can also get access to our video and image generation tools. And so if this is something that you've got, whether it's in a marketing capacity, whether it's something that's used for training purposes, there's the ability to also integrate these incredible tools, which if you're curious at why there's a little banana next to the generate images, the name that we have given to our image generation model is Nano Banana. And so now we have bananas all over our software. And then Veo is our video generation model. And so you also have access to that to work inside of this particular environment. As I said, over the long term, you'll be able to connect into your entire ecosystem. You'll be able to add those services so that that enterprise software is all working together in concert. But let's talk about what it looks like to have day one value. Let's talk about how that can come together for you so that you can start to see these are the things that on the very first day I can give my staff access to that makes them incredibly productive. And so because I don't want to make you watch me type, I'm gonna flip directly to a tab where I already typed this in. And so what you can see here is this is the deep research agent. And what this is actually capable of doing is it's capable of both looking within your data ecosystem, right? So that it can start to look at the data that you've granted it access to. You can see here, I uploaded a document already into this, a PDF document. So again, if I've got a bunch of files that I've been working with, I can add those files to the context of the deep research agent. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to research that. And I've also given it access to Google search information so that it's not just going to be limited on these enterprise data sets that I've got. And it's going to be able to research across all aspects of this, right? And so it's going to pull all that together for me. Now, and again, I'm going to do this cooking show style because Deep Research Agent can take a couple of minutes to run through. And rather than have you just watch the screen, go through its thinking pattern, I will show you what this prompt, actually delivered for us. And so what this actually delivered for us, right? So I wanted to look at recent events across the world. So for the next couple of demos, let's imagine that I work in a transportation and a logistics agency in a government. And I'm worried about bridge failures because we've had a recent one and we want to make sure that we're figuring this out. And so one of the things that I was really excited about was, could we start to identify, using drones, whether or not some of the components in the bridges are failing? And what would it look like for us to see other patterns of what other failures have been in the past and what we could have identified with something like this new technology so that we can, push that forward. So what you can see is the first thing the research agent does is it gives me a plan. It gives me the ability to tell it, am I doing the right things here, right? And so it thought through this little brief prompt that I gave it, and it put together this entire cohesive plan that I said, start research, right? Let's get going. And so what you can see that it then provides is it does a deep understanding of everything, both inside the document, which was about one specific bridge failure, but then it also used Google search information to go do case studies against other possible failures, right? And so it was able to look through and see what are some of the places that there have been failures in the past across a lot of these, right? And so what you can then see is that it knew that what I was curious about was whether I could use drone and AI analysis to be able to make this better. And so it's telling me here that it's found ways that I could use it to look for corrosion. I can look for cracks and fractures. You can train a model that can do those kinds of different defect analysis for you, all the way through being able to compare 3D models with LiDAR and things like that. So some really good ideas that it's been able to generate and help me kind of put forward. And then it also then gives me, what are my action steps, right? So assuming that this is something that I want to take on and I want to do more with, I can now make it so that these action steps are a little bit more easy to follow along with, and a little bit of a higher value. And just realizing I should probably make that a little bit bigger for you all, a little bit higher value, so that I know what I need to do on day one to get through all of this. Another just interesting thing, comes up with my exec sum, but it also gives me a research audio summary. So again, if you've been using Notebook LM, that's a component of Gemini for Government, you may know that this amazing ability to just generate podcasts on the fly is something that you've got the ability to do as well. And so it gives me a 2-minute snapshot, so that if this is how I consume data best, I have that ability to come in and find that information right away. And so this is our deep research agent, available out of the box, FedRAMP High. We're moving into the impact level 4 and 5 as well. So that's the first way that you can be productive on day one. And then what I mentioned is that after day one, the next kinds of things that you may want to do is build and deploy your own agents. And so here, this is our agent designer technology. And what's interesting about the agent designer technology is what we're getting to here is this is well beyond just prompting, right? We've all kind of heard of like prompt engineers and things like that. We've moved significantly beyond needing to learn to prompt. And so again, I am going to cut and paste into this so you don't have to watch me type it. But what you can see here is that I'm going to coordinate an emergency bridge response. I'm going to generate situational reports. I need to assign staff. I need to manage schedules. And I need to draft communications. Because if we've got an emergency on our bridges, I don't want to solve this once, right? I want to solve this every time it comes across my desk. And so this is where we move from just individual day one productivity, where it was able to help me think through one problem. Now I wanted to help me structure and build out a small fleet of agents that can work together across these complex things that would have taken me days or weeks to be able to actually get done. And just like that, in 20 or 30 seconds, it's built an agent for me. And what I like to just show here is that it's built this agent, and it didn't build one, it actually built 5 agents, because it recognized that inside that particular prompt was multiple things that it needed to be able to accomplish. And so when I come and I look at the controlling agent, you can see that it's got just some information here, but it's also got a full instruction set. And if there's anything that's inside of this instruction set that I don't like, that doesn't actually meet what I would actually want it to do, right? Maybe it's not the assigned inspection staff, but something else that I needed to be able to do at this point. I have the ability to come in and edit this before I actually create and save my agent. The other thing that you can see is I can give it access to specific knowledge. I can give it access to different data sets that can make it so that it's going to be able to do this appropriately across everything, right? And that is true across all 5 of the total agents that have been built, was that each one has a specific goal and outcome that are going to work together to make it so that you're going to be able to accomplish the task that is in front of you. So that's as easy as it gets in terms of being able to build your own agent and being able to have that to be able to run that. But let's say that I want to do an agent like this, but I actually also want to integrate more things, right? I want to be able to do a few more tasks inside of that. I want to give it a little bit of tool use and a few more data sources that I can't access inside of that particular portfolio. What I'm going to do is here. And I'm going to add, again, one more copy paste job here, where I'm going to ask it to analyze the structural bearing failure. So if we had a bridge failure that had, a structural failing in terms of what's going on inside of it, I need it to be able to tell me what are the risks to the similar structures. And sorry, I'm trying to make sure I can see. Yeah, there it goes. So as it goes through this is what we call an ADK agent, or Agent Development Kit agent, which was built inside of our Vertex AI platform. And what it actually had access to was it had access to multiple other databases, because what you can see is that it understood that there was something going on in bridge A47. It's able to give me the individual situational intel on that particular one. And so then what you can see is it's able to tell me what are some of the other bridges that I'm going to need to work on, and what am I going to need to take action on that are jurisdiction wide, right? And it can go and it can access the different traffic patterns and traffic levels that are contained in another application. And so this is why we had to use the ADK for this particular one, was that it's going to be accessing more than just one set of data sources that's available to Gemini for Government. It needed to be able to go out and access it through multiple different components and portfolios that exist all together. And so then you can see we asked it to look for social media. We want to know what's going on across those ecosystems. So I've got that all kind of available to me, and I can see everything that's going on across the different social platforms. But it was also then able to help me build out a technical analysis, right? It was able to look for what might have happened and what are some of the things that I should be diving into on day one when I've got something critical that's on my desk. And then you can also see, won't spend too much more time here, but it gives me these recommended actions. What are we going to be able to need to do? But also has access to my field reporting teams, right? Who's in place today to go take action on those bridges that are most sensitive that I have to go out and take a look at today. And so making sure that I can get access to that team and be able to get them in the right place at the right time is incredibly important when we're in these kinds of emergency capabilities. And then because it's useful, it also gives me the visual of what's going on those particular bridges. And it's able to look through the different, data sources that I have available to me to be able to see what are the types and places where these design failures could have happened. So as I'm trying to synthesize all this information, I can really kind of look at what's the best possible place for those, maybe those drones to go take a look at as we move forward. And so that's the demo, right? The multiple demos of ways that you can be working on, day one. You're going to integrate adding your own data to a query. You're going to use the deep research agent to be able to pull the most interesting things out of that information, as well as research across the rest of the Google search world or anything else that you've given it access to. You can build and deploy your own agents that have multiple agents that work inside of them, all the way to building and deploying like an enterprise-wide agent that has broader access to everything that you need. So I will flip back to our slides and talk just quickly. I want to talk quickly on the anatomy of what an agent actually is, because we've been using this word for a while now, but let's make sure that we're grounded on the same kind of playing field of what we think an agent actually is. Because if it's just a chatbot, that's not an agent, right? It can be helpful and it can be useful, but that's not what we're talking about when we talk about agents. And if it's just searching and summarizing a document or your own information, you're moving up the stack, but you're still not really in a full agentic capability. So an agent has to be these four things. One, it should be goal-oriented. You have to be able to give it one task that it's going to do particularly well, right? Think about the agent that we built in the agent builder and the agent designer. In that agent designer, it figured out based on the prompt that it actually needed 4 sub-agents to be able to take that particular task on. Secondly, it should have the ability to plan and reason and then show you what those plans are, right? This is a really important thing that is, about a year old in the AI world, which is making it so that these models can actually create a reasoning trace for you, so that you see what do they think is the right steps to take, and you can kind of edit that. You can make sure that it's going down the right pathways as it does it. And so an agent has to have some reasoning capability. It's not just an if then else kind of agent. It should actually be able to think through the complexities of the problem, orienting them to the goal. I've talked a little bit already on the tool use, right? But making sure that those agents have access to do something, right? What can they go into the ecosystem? What can they pull out? What can they push back into that environment? So having tool use and integrated is really important. And then having state and memory. Like an agent should be capable of getting better over time. And the only way that that's going to happen is if you've given it some state and some memory, so that it can start to kind of unpack what it is that it's attempting to do. And so as you're thinking about for your public sector entity, what are the agents that I need to do? These are going to be the first 4 things that you think about. Like, does it have these kinds of capabilities? If so, it's a good use case for an agent. So what's, we already looked a little bit about the deep research agent, but just to hone in, Google is coming out with multiple, what we call first party agents. The deep research agent is the first one. We also have an idea generation agent, or, Brent mentioned at the top of the call about the co-scientist agent that's also available for our research institutions. These are all first party, where Google has built kind of the harness for that agent. Then you just get to use it and get all of the benefit from it. And so these are what we call first party agents that are going to be kind of deeply integrated through the entire stack, but you have the capability of using them on day one in your environment. But then there's the entire gallery of agents. And so for those of you on the call that are from the IT side of the world, this is where you get to kind of govern and control what is being accessed and what are the security parameters of the agents that are being put forth. And so as you look into an agent gallery, what you're seeing here is that the IT organization can figure out what agents it wants to promote into that Gemini for Government interface so that people have access to them. So this makes sure that, if you're not having willy-nilly somebody pushing an agent out to everybody across the entire workforce, but there's a gating mechanism, there's a set of systems and controls that you can see, and you have visibility in the administrative backend, what it looks like to make sure that these are the right agents for your agency. Now, we are not going to do this by ourselves. Google does not work in that fashion. And so we're really proud to say that we have a whole bunch of partners. You got 6 of them here on the screen that have already gone through and earned one of our partner badges for Gemini for Government. And what that means is that they've been through a exhaustive course to make sure that they can get in, they can deliver that day one value, but they can also do that kind of hard work of helping you to configure the back end of, what are the data sources that I'm connecting to? How am I getting the access to them? How am I, building and deploying agents? These 6 partners are going to be one of your first stops in terms of being able to start to solve those problems across your ecosystem as well. And we've got a bunch more coming online, but these are 6 of our early movers that have come on board with us already. And so I'm going to wrap there and kind of come back to a couple of key points, right? One is I want to reinforce what Brent started with, which is this is real. When you've already got 70% of folks that are seeing productivity gains out of this and almost 50% seeing doubling of workforce productivity, that's real. This is in a moment in time where we are not going to be able to slow down. We have to help our workforce to have access to these tools. We don't want another moment of shadow IT where people are using things that are not secure and compliant because they're really helpful for them. We want to give them the secure and compliant tools that puts that in front of them today. We want to help people to have a front door so they're not overwhelmed by this. We can't make it so that every one of our workers has to relearn every platform because now it's got some amount of AI in it, right? We have to simplify this. We have to create an interface and use a common language that makes it so that we can do these things better together with our workforce. And so as you look forward, I'm going to jump over into the Q&A section. So please, if you haven't posted questions yet, feel free to go ahead and throw a couple of questions in, and we should have time to run through quite a few of them. But as we go through that, just think to yourself, what are the ways that this could interact in your own environments, and we can start to push that forward. So with that, I'm going to pull up the questions that I have seen come in so far. All right, the first one is, how should we think about what types of agents to build first? So here, what I want you to think about is two things, right? I mentioned the four things to think about in terms of what agents are, but I want to actually now hone in a little bit on what does it mean to prioritize this. I like to think there's two big tasks that you have to take on here. So task one, you have to make sure that the goal that you're giving it is specific. It has to have a beginning and an end. It has to be something that is understandable, that you can say when it's done. Because kind of an anti-pattern, something that doesn't go well, is if you make it really amorphous, like I want to solve, like this big hairy problem. Now it's not specific enough in its goal and its task. You don't know when it's done. Secondly, you need to make sure that that task, if you had 1,000 new people at your agency doing that task, would it add value to the agency? If the answer is no, that might just be a toy agent. It might not actually provide any significant value to you. But if the answer is yes, having 1,000 people go do that task would be tremendous, right? Man, we've got a backload of documentation that needs to be synthesized. We need to be able to pull information off of it. We need to be able to reason on that and have it land into this structured data set. And if I had somebody that could go read all, 10,000 of that backlog today, yeah, that would provide a lot of value to me. That's a good example of an agent to start with today. So that's question one. Let me look here at a couple of the next ones here. Suggestions on how to prompt Gemini so that it's more efficient and helps one to be more productive. I think some of this is getting better over time, meaning that the models themselves, as they improve, you are actually seeing the models where they don't require quite as much like customization in terms of the prompt engineering. But I do think what's important here is giving it enough structure that it understands what you're trying to accomplish, right? So when you're trying to make it understand something, give it a couple of bullet points on what's most important to you in what you're trying to accomplish. Just the same, I think it's important that we think of these things in many ways like a really, really smart intern in your organization, where you're not going to have to spell everything out for them. But if you give them a little bit more data to start with, they're always going to be more productive. They'll always be more likely to meet your expectations if you made those expectations explicit for them. So, I think my top tip here is to just make sure that you are being explicit with the agent on what you're asking it to do to make that kind of thing happen. All right, next one down here. Do organizations, local government, sheriff's office, in my case, thank you for your work, need to have contract for Google Workspace and the whole organization? Or, if you're a Microsoft shop, but you'd love to use Gemini for Government, I appreciate that. So this is, you do not need to be a Workspace customer to use Gemini for Government. It's a good kind of detanglement of those two particular services. They work great together. You can use the Workspace as a data source for it, but you don't need to have your identity. You don't have to use us for email or calendar or anything like that. You can very much live and stay within your Microsoft ecosystem for all of those tools. And so you can start and you can get working on the Gemini platform without making any change to the rest of those. So no, you don't need to sign up for Workspace for that. The Gemini for Government can be stood up basically inside of our cloud environments without any direct ties. And then you can continue to use your Azure Active Directory as the user management for those folks. And then over time, you can also start to integrate, SharePoint and all those kinds of things as a data connector. That's in that ongoing section that I talked about later. So you can actually get your Microsoft ecosystem kind of hooked into that as well. All right. let's see. How well, this is an interesting one. I'm going to think about it as I say it. How well will Gemini perform research on specific transportation topics, such as safety hydraulics? Whoever asked this, I would like for you to tell me. So this is, it's kind of an overarching conversation that I didn't touch on, but is important to kind of recognize as we go through this. And that is that we build a general purpose tool when we talk about these AI models. And what I mean by that is that I can't tell you particularly everything that it's going to do really, really well and where it may struggle a little bit. And so when you think about a safety perspective, what I think it'll probably do pretty well, it'll probably understand, kind of the corpus of information. It'll probably understand any spatial reasoning that's required for that. But if you want to get real far on that, what you need to do is you need to provide more and more context to it. And so the more you can bring context to the model, and so if there's specific documentation, if there's specific imagery, if there's specific videos that you can use that can teach the model in real time, it will be able to adjust to that so that it'll actually get better at that coming out. And so that's kind of a broad statement across, the whole ecosystem is, if you're curious at like, how will it handle a fairly specialized use case? The answer to that oftentimes is it depends how much context you've given it. So making sure that you think through what are the pieces of context that you can give it, what are the things that it can read up on as it's answering your queries. That's going to be something that's really important. Next one, is there a webinar planned for higher education audience? Is the government platform available to higher education institutions? Is there something specific that has integrations into Canvas or other common LMSs? So we did want to try to make sure that we cover the whole public sector spectrum. I know that the branding on this is Gemini for Government, but we did want to make sure that everything that you saw that I went through in the demo, those are all tools that exist in the same platform that is available for our higher educational institutions and K through 12 institutions as well. So the answer is yes, you have access to this Gemini for Government platform, just the same as government agencies do. And so, we on the education side, we also have a few things, as you mentioned, where we're trying to do better data connectors into some of the existing LMSs so that you're not, working from scratch trying to connect into Canvas and things like that. And so you absolutely will have access to the same sets of services as what you saw today. I don't know, we can take it as good feedback as to whether or not we should have one that's dedicated purely to an educational perspective, but know that yes, you absolutely can use this particular thing. All right. What are the guardrails that would be built into the system to prevent fraud, and how will the information entered be secured and not sold? And so what I want to stress here is that this comes back to that security compliance that I mentioned at the outset. When we went through and got our FedRAMP authorization, a big part of that is going through an auditing process to show that what we are doing, we are keeping this data secure, private, and completely housed away from any training material that Google uses. And so in terms of it being not sold, right? This is an important just aspect of it is it's not just the data that you connect into it that we're keeping private. All of your prompts are also kept private and secure as well. None of that is Google information. None of that can be used to further train our models to make anything better from the Google side. It's not involved in any of Google's ads business. And so when we work with you with the Gemini for Government platform and really all of our Google Cloud platform, we will hold your data in a different ecosystem that is not available to any of those other systems. Then the other component to that, right? I didn't get deep into some of the security weeds on it, but just understand also that we build inside our cloud platform the ability for you to kind of contain these things and run, for example, Model Armor is one of the services that is integrated into the Gemini for Government platform. And that means that if you've got PHI or you've got PII that's inside of these systems, you can actually use Model Armor to strip that information out from the prompts ever getting it back out. And it'll also do things like make sure that you can't do prompt injection against the actual ecosystem. And so that also gives you a few extra ways to make sure that you're securing your data on top of Google's commitment to you from just a privacy perspective. There's other configurations that as we go forward and put this together with you, or if you work with one of those partners that I mentioned, we can make sure that we're building the right security parameters to live on top of that, so that you've got access to it. All right. Let's see. I've got a couple minutes left. I'm just scrolling through some of the questions to see if there's ones that I think are general across a lot of y'all. Oh, this is just a good thing to be clear about. I see Gemini for Government is in process for low impact for FedRAMP authorization. Do you have an anticipated approval timeline, and are there plans to accredit it at the moderate impact level? This is kind of an interesting nuance, which is we're going through the FedRAMP 20X program with the federal administration today, and that's where we're coming in at the low category to get, as I mentioned, that checklist of features that I showed you for FedRAMP High. We have the ability to launch it at that FedRAMP High with all of those features. There's a couple of features that weren't on that chart that are not currently at the FedRAMP High level. And so those are things where we made sure we applied for the entirety of the FedRAMP low to start with the FedRAMP 20X process. And so if you see it on the website looking a little bit different than what you would anticipate, that's why there's a bit of a delta there. I can't speak to the exact timelines on that. That's between GSA and us and figuring out some of those details. But we do anticipate pushing for everything coming up to as high of an impact level as we possibly can. All right. Here's one that says, we are not able to use Gemini 3 because it's not exclusively hosted on US data centers. Will this be coming soon for us? The way that we are handling upcoming model releases, including Gemini 3, is that right now in cloud, in the Google Cloud world, Gemini 3 is in preview status. One of the differentiations between preview status and general availability is that when it's generally available, it can be located just within the United States regions. And so at that point, it's going to be more available for broader use across our folks that are in the public sector. And so we anticipate that sometime in the next couple of weeks that you're going to see the model continue to move forward into GA. But the great thing is that every time we have a model release, as soon as it's GA, it is going to be inside that platform. There's no change in costs. There's no change in anything that's going to be inside the platform. So we have this ability to kind of launch these models. And as soon as we've got the capacity to launch them in country, they will be available for our users. All right. Might have time for... Does Gemini Enterprise use any of the government agency's data to train its underlying models? If the answer is no, how do you prove that? We would only train on public available data and Google private data, and so we do not. That's in our model cards. And so if you're curious about some of that, you can get into the Gemini series of families model cards in terms of where data comes from, in terms of how we do our training regimes. Again, to an earlier point that I made, if you wanted to understand more of your corpus of information, you're going to have to add that to the context so that it can understand that, because we're only going to be able to see what is publicly available on the internet. That's what we've used for our training corpus when building out the Gemini family of models. All right, let me see if I can rock one more question in here. This is just a good one of just, is there a way to take a test run? And what to think about here is, we will work with you, right? And so when you contact us in the Google public sector, we will happily work with you to make sure that you can get access to the sets of tools in the right way to make sure that you get a test run on it, right? It is not our intention to make this that you won't be able to see it or try it before you start to actually work with it in your entire organization. And so absolutely make sure that you're reaching out to us, and we can get folks licenses and we can get folks started off so that they've got, safe, secure place to get things started. So with that, I want to just recommend to all of you, if you take a look, there's the full ROI report, as well as the AI agent toolkit. They are both available in the resource tab. So before you go, make sure you take a look, download those so that you can get all that information out of them. And we'll try to follow up. And all of this webinar is available. The recording is available. And so you can come back in and you can take another look at things that you might have missed. And we'll make sure we post any other additional information there. In the meantime, thank you again, everyone, for attending, and really, really wish you all the best.